Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, not because of aches and pains, but because of something your son or daughter said? Not loud, not cruel on the surface, but it stung. It lingered. It made you feel like maybe your love, your sacrifices, even your presence didn't matter much at all. If that's ever happened to you, I want you to know this. You're not imagining things, and you are most certainly not alone. As we grow older, our bodies may slow down, but our hearts don't stop needing connection, respect, and truth. What hurts isn't that our children move on with their lives, that's natural. What hurts is when they begin to speak in ways that slowly chip away at our dignity. Sometimes it's just a comment here or there, a dismissive phrase, a sarcastic tone. Other times, it's clearer than that, a complete reversal in how they once looked at you. And you wonder, when did it change? What did I miss? Now, let me be clear, this isn't about blaming your children. We all stumble in relationships. But there comes a time, yes, even as a parent, when you must draw a line in the sand. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with strength, with peace. Because the truth is, love should never require you to accept mistreatment. Not even from the very people you raised. Today, I want to walk with you through something that may be uncomfortable, but necessary. There are certain phrases, things your adult children may say, that should stop you in your tracks. Words that, if repeated, reveal more than just a passing mood. They reveal a mindset. And if you're not careful, they can pull you into a cycle of guilt, silence, and even emotional neglect. But not anymore. Not on your watch. Let's talk about the first one. It may sound like this: you owe me, or, after everything you did, I turned out this way. It might come during a heated moment, or slip out casually over the phone. Maybe they're talking about a challenge they're facing, and suddenly the blame points backwards towards you, and I want you to pause right there. Yes, none of us were perfect parents. We all made mistakes. But here's what they're forgetting. You gave your best. You gave your time, your money, your sleep, your dreams. You held it together when everything was falling apart. You went without so they could have enough. And even if there were flaws and regrets and things you wish you had done differently, none of that justifies being shamed or blamed decades later by an adult who is now responsible for their own choices. If your child is struggling, they deserve support, compassion, and honesty, but not a scapegoat, not someone to dump blame on. The moment they say, "You owe me," they're no longer having a conversation. They're rewriting the past to suit their present pain. And that's dangerous because when guilt is the foundation of a relationship, everything else becomes unstable. You feel afraid to speak your mind. You walk on eggshells. You begin to give in to things that don't feel right just to avoid hearing those words again. Let me remind you of something powerful. You are not just a parent. You are a person, a full human being with worth, dignity, and a life story that deserves respect. So if your adult child continues to treat you like an emotional punching bag for their adult problems, it is okay. It is wise to step back, create distance. Let them know, I will always love you, but I will not be blamed for everything wrong in your life. I am here if you want to talk like equals, not if you want to attack me. Because the older we get, the less time we have for guilt that doesn't belong to us. Now, let's talk about another phrase that may be harder to notice but cuts just as deep. I don't have time for this right now. Maybe you called because you missed them. Maybe you needed help with something. Or maybe you simply wanted to share a memory. One of those little treasures that used to mean everything when they were small. And all you got was a sigh, a cold brush off, a reminder that their life is busy, urgent, and you're not part of the priority list anymore. Let me be clear, being busy isn't the issue. Life moves fast for everyone, but when I don't have time for this becomes a regular way of speaking to you, that's no longer about time. That's about value. That's about the message. My world matters more than yours. Your needs are inconvenient. Your voice, your feelings, your presence don't fit in my schedule. Now, I know you may be tempted to make excuses for them. They're under pressure, you might say, or they don't mean it. But here's the hard truth. Repeated dismissiveness becomes a form of emotional neglect, And neglect, whether intentional or not, causes harm. You raised them through sleepless nights. You gave them a shoulder when they cried. You showed up every single day, even when no one showed up for you. So now that they're grown, is it really asking too much for a little time, a little patience, a little kindness? If you find yourself constantly getting brushed off, pushed aside, or made to feel like a burden, it's time to pause. To stop chasing, to stop begging for crumbs of attention, because you don't have to fight to be seen. You are not disposable. You are not just someone they call when they feel like it, or ignore when it's inconvenient. And if they continue to speak to you like you're in the way, over and over again, it may be time to stop calling. To stop offering, to take a quiet step back and focus on yourself for once. That isn't selfish. That's self-respect. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say isn't angry or loud. It's simply, I won't let myself be treated like this anymore. And then you begin to live. You begin to breathe again. You go for a walk without worrying about their return text. You make dinner just the way you like it. You laugh again with people who look you in the eye and don't see an obligation, but a blessing. Because that's what you are. You've carried enough for long enough. Now it's time to carry yourself with dignity, peace, and a heart that still has so much love to give to people who actually want to receive it, you know? The hard part about getting older isn't always the health issues or the slower mornings. It's watching the people you once held in your arms, the ones who used to look up at you like you were the center of their world, suddenly act like your presence doesn't matter anymore. You remember their birthdays without fail. You remember the tiny school plays, the scraped knees, the way they used to run to you after a long day. And now, you get told that your expectations are too high, that your love is too much, or worse. You're made to feel like an inconvenience. But let's talk about something you might have heard. A phrase that sounds small, but it lands like a punch in the gut. You're being too sensitive. At first glance, it might seem harmless. Maybe they said it after you expressed how a comment hurt you. Or maybe you mentioned how lonely you've been feeling lately, and instead of compassion, they met you with rolled eyes or a sarcastic chuckle. And then, those 4 little words, you're being too sensitive. What that really means is, your feelings don't matter here. Let's stop and sit with that for a moment. All your life, you've been the one holding space for other people's feelings. You've comforted crying children, stayed silent to avoid conflict, swallowed hurt just to keep the peace. And now, when you express a need, a simple, human, honest need, you're told it's an overreaction. That isn't fair, and more than that, it's dismissive. See, when someone tells you you're too sensitive, what they're really doing is trying to shut down the conversation. They don't want to deal with how their words or actions affected you. So instead, they flip the script and make you the problem. It's not, I hurt you, and I want to understand. It's, you're the issue because you noticed the hurt. Let me remind you of something right now. Sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a strength. It means you feel deeply. It means you care. It means you are connected to the people and moments that matter. And if someone tries to use that against you, that's not your fault. That's their inability to connect with kindness. Now, here's where it becomes dangerous. When this kind of phrase gets said repeatedly, when your feelings are brushed aside again and again, you start to second-guess yourself. You start to wonder if maybe you are too emotional. Maybe you are asking for too much. That kind of thinking eats away at yourself. And before you know it, you stop speaking up altogether. You bottle things in. You become quiet at family dinners, nod politely on the phone, pretend everything's fine because the last time you were honest, you were told it was too much. But let me say this loud and clear. You don't have to shrink to keep someone else comfortable. If your child keeps invalidating your feelings, especially when you're speaking from the heart, you have every right to step back. You are allowed to say, if I can't be honest with you, I won't continue this conversation. That's not drama. That's not emotional manipulation. That's healthy boundaries. And don't worry, setting a boundary doesn't mean you're closing the door forever. It just means you're protecting your peace. Because guess what? Your peace is sacred. And anyone who wants to be in your life should be willing to respect that. Let's move on to another phrase. One that hurts in a quieter, more hidden way. And that is, you wouldn't understand. Sometimes they say it when talking about their jobs or their relationships or the way the world works. Now, it can be brushed off as a joke, like, "Oh, Mum, it's complicated. You wouldn't get it," or, "Dad, that's just how it is now. You're old-fashioned." And maybe you smile. You let it slide. But deep down, it stings. Because what they're really saying is, your voice is outdated. Your opinions are irrelevant. You're not part of my world anymore. Now, of course, there are things that change with time. Technology moves fast. Culture evolves. But dismissing someone because of their age, that's not progress. That's disrespect. You've lived through wars, recessions, social movements, heartbreaks, and comebacks. You've adapted, reinvented yourself, raised families, built communities. There's wisdom in your experience that no textbook or YouTube video can replicate. So when someone you love, someone you raised, says, "You wouldn't understand," what they're doing is cutting off a connection. They're building a wall between generations instead of a bridge. And the irony is, most of the things they're dealing with, love, loneliness, fear, rejection, pressure, you've been through all of it. You may not know the slang or the latest apps, but you sure know what it means to fight through tough times, to carry the weight of a family, to survive the days when no one had your back but you. The real question isn't whether you understand, it's whether they're willing to listen. If your adult child keeps speaking to you like you're out of touch, if they roll their eyes every time you offer perspective, if they make you feel like your words are just noise, then it may be time to ask yourself, why am I continuing to show up for someone who has no interest in hearing me? Because love is not a one-way street. Respect is not something you have to earn over and over again, just because the calendar turned a few pages. You are allowed to say, "I may not know everything, but I've lived through more than you realize. If you're not willing to include me, I won't keep forcing my presence into a life where I'm no longer invited." That's not giving up. That's giving yourself space to be honored the way you deserve. And something beautiful happens when you make that choice. You begin to find connection in new places. Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's a grandchild who actually loves to hear your stories. Maybe it's someone in your community who lights up every time you walk into the room. See, the more we pull away from places where we're disrespected, the more space we create for real love to walk in. You don't have to chase after people who've forgotten how to value you, especially not your own children. It doesn't mean you love them any less. It just means you finally remembered to love yourself a little more. There comes a moment in life when silence speaks louder than words ever could. Not the kind of silence that's peaceful, but the kind that fills the space after someone you love says something that makes you feel small, unimportant, or unseen. And if you've made it this far, I want to say this. You've shown courage. It takes strength to look at your own children, the people you once fed, carried, and cried over, and admit that some of their words are no longer coming from love. So let's talk about one more phrase, one that's often used in quiet control, wrapped in guilt, and disguised as care. It sounds like this. If you really loved me, it doesn't matter what comes after that sentence. Whether it's, you'd give me money, you'd babysit more, you'd stop bringing up the past, or you'd let me live my life. The moment love is turned into a transaction, something sacred is lost. Because that's not love. That's manipulation. See, when someone says, "If you love me, you would," they are placing conditions on your love. They're putting you in a position where saying no means you're not loving enough. And that's a game you will never win, because the rules will keep changing. The bar will keep moving, and no matter how much you give, it will never be enough. Now, let's be honest. You've already given. You gave your best years. You gave comfort when you barely had any for yourself. You gave forgiveness when they didn't even ask for it. You gave parts of yourself that you can never get back. You don't owe anyone proof of your love, not after all that. So if your adult child uses love like a bargaining chip, you have every right to step back and say, "Love is not something to be weaponized. I've always loved you, but I won't let that love be used against me." And you know what? That boundary may make them uncomfortable. That's okay. Uncomfortable is sometimes the first step toward real growth. Now, let's talk about the last phrase. The one that can leave a scar that no one else sees. You were never there for me. Some of you may have already heard that one. Maybe they said it in anger. Maybe it came during an argument years after the fact. Or maybe it was said casually, like a throwaway line, but it stuck with you like a stone in your chest. And you found yourself thinking, what? I was always there. I worked long hours to put food on the table. I stayed up with you when you were sick. I held back tears so you wouldn't see how tired I was. How could you say, I was never there? This kind of phrase doesn't just hurt, it haunts, because it makes you question your entire history as a parent. It rewrites the past in a way that paints you as absent, cold, or selfish, when all you ever tried to be was strong. But here's the truth. Memory is tricky. Sometimes people remember pain more clearly than effort. Sometimes children grow up and look back through the lens of their own unmet needs and forget everything that was given. That doesn't mean their feelings don't matter. But it also doesn't mean their version of the story is the only truth. Maybe you weren't always emotionally present because you were in survival mode. Maybe you made choices that were painful in the moment, but necessary for the long run. Maybe you did the best you could with what you had and still carry guilt for the times you fell short. But don't let one sentence undo a lifetime of love. If your child says, "You were never there," and they refuse to have a real, open-hearted conversation about the past, then they're not trying to heal. They're trying to hurt, and as much as you love them, you do not have to carry shame that no longer belongs to you. You can say, "I'm open to healing" if you are, but I won't be defined by your pain alone. I have my own story. I have my own truth. And I deserve to be seen in it too, because healing is not one-sided, and relationships only grow when both people are willing to see each other clearly. Now, you may be wondering, what if I walk away and they never come back? That's a question that keeps many parents stuck in pain. They keep enduring, tolerating, giving too much of themselves just to keep the door open, even if it means losing themselves in the process. But here's the thing. Walking away doesn't always mean slamming the door shut. Sometimes it means stepping out into the sunlight to breathe again. Sometimes it means giving space for both of you to reflect instead of reacting. Sometimes it's the very thing that finally wakes them up, because when you stop being so readily available, when you stop picking up the phone after every sharp word or giving money after every guilt trip, they begin to realize what your presence truly meant. And if they don't, if they never return the love and respect you've shown them, then you still win. Because you've chosen yourself. You've chosen peace over chaos. You've chosen a life filled with moments that lift you up, not wear you down. You still have time. You still have so much beauty ahead of you. Don't spend these years trying to earn love you already gave in abundance. You are not just someone's parent. You are someone's friend, someone's neighbor, someone's source of light in a world that desperately needs wisdom, grace, and steady hearts like yours. There are people who will treat you with kindness. There are people who will listen to your stories with wide eyes and open hearts. There are people who will say, "I'm glad you're here," without expecting anything in return. Make room for them, and remember, walking away doesn't mean you've stopped loving your children. It means you've stopped allowing that love to be used as a weapon. Because love is not a license to hurt. It's not a hall pass for disrespect. And it's not something that disappears just because you finally stood up and said, "Enough. You've done enough. You've given enough. And now, it's your turn to receive." Let the rest of your life be lived in dignity, in joy, in quiet strength. And if your kids come back one day, ready to speak differently, to treat you better, to rebuild what was broken, your heart will still be there. But this time, you'll meet them with the wisdom to know the difference between love and control, between connection and compliance, between being needed and being respected, because you are not too sensitive. You are not outdated. You are not a burden. You are a blessing. And the ones who see that clearly, they're the ones worth walking toward, not the ones you have to chase. You've made it here. And if you're still watching, still listening, still with me, then I know one thing for sure. Your heart is stronger than you think. Because facing the reality that your own children might be the source of your pain, that takes a kind of quiet courage most people never talk about. We live in a world that tells parents to keep giving no matter what, to stay silent, to never question, to believe that unconditional love means unconditional tolerance. But you know what? That's not true. Love is patient, yes. Love is kind, yes. But love is also honest. And there comes a time, especially after 60, when your days are more precious than ever. When love must also be protective. Protective of your mind, protective of your heart, protective of your peace. There's nothing wrong with being the kind of parent who gave everything. That's who you are. You stayed when others might have walked away. You gave when it cost you. You loved when it wasn't returned. But now you have to ask, what kind of life do I want to live for? For myself. Because you deserve a life that feels safe, dignified, and full of moments that bring you joy. If your child speaks to you with contempt, if they manipulate your love, if they brush off your pain or rewrite your story, then yes, you may have to walk away. But hear me, walking away doesn't mean giving up on them. It means coming back to yourself. The version of you who loves deeply, but knows where the line is. The version of you who has survived decades of storms and still stands. The version of you who has more wisdom in your little finger than some folks will gain in a lifetime. Now is the time to honor that version. Maybe you've spent years feeling like you're on the outside of your own family. Maybe you've been told, directly or indirectly, that you're too emotional, too difficult, too needy. But let me tell you something that may be hard to hear, that isn't about you. That's about them. How people treat you is often a reflection of their own pain, their own immaturity, their own lack of healing. But how you respond, that's your power, and you still have power. Power to say, no more. Power to say, I matter, too. Power to say, this isn't love. This is control. You get to reclaim your time, your voice, your energy. Start small if you have to. Instead of waiting by the phone for their call, go sit outside in the sunlight. Instead of replaying old arguments in your head, write a letter to your younger self, the one who worked so hard to raise them. Instead of trying to fix a one-sided relationship, pour into the relationships that pour back into you. Maybe that's a neighbor who checks on you just to say hello. Maybe it's a friend who remembers your birthday without needing Facebook to remind them. Maybe it's a grandchild who lights up when you tell them stories from when you were young. Love exists all around you. It may just not be coming from the places you expected. And that's okay. You're not too late. You're not too old. You're not too broken to experience real, honest, mutual love. You may not be able to change your children's behavior. You can change your boundaries. And when you do that, you create room for peace to return. You begin to wake up without dread. You begin to look in the mirror and like who you see. You begin to remember that your story is still being written. I want you to think about this. What would your life look like if you stopped chasing people who never turn around? What would it feel like to be loved for exactly who you are without having to perform, apologize, or prove yourself? That life is still available to you. But it starts when you stop letting guilt write your script. You don't need to keep shrinking to make others feel bigger. You don't need to keep giving pieces of yourself to people who never notice when you're empty. You've done enough. Now, it's time to rest, to heal, to live, not bitterly, not angrily, but peacefully, firmly with grace, and maybe, just maybe, your children will notice your absence. Maybe they'll realize that love wasn't supposed to come with conditions. Maybe they'll come back, not with excuses, but with humility. And if they do, you'll meet them from a place of strength, not as someone who begged for love, but as someone who knows exactly what they're worth. But even if they don't, you will still be okay. Because you're no longer waiting for them to define your happiness. You're defining it for yourself. So, if you're watching this right now, and any of this has touched something deep inside, know that this channel is a space for you. You're not alone. There are millions of us US who understand what it feels like to outgrow relationships you never thought you'd have to question, who understand what it means to choose yourself, even when it breaks your heart, who understand the quiet, sacred strength it takes to walk away with dignity. If you've ever experienced these moments with your children, if any of these 6 phrases have found their way into your life, I invite you to share your story in the comments below, not for sympathy, but for solidarity. Because when we speak our truth, we help others speak theirs. And if this video gave you even a little bit of clarity, peace, or courage today, I'd be honored if you'd give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so we can keep growing together. We have so much more life left to live, and it starts when we stop giving our power away. Here's to letting go of guilt. Here's to standing tall in your truth. Here's to finding love where it's real and walking away from where it's not. You are strong. You are worthy. You are not alone. Until next time, take care of yourself. And don't forget, you're allowed to walk away and still love with your whole heart.